if something needs to be said, what I do right now is I'm very intentional. And that's what I'll tell people, be intentional. Pause, but do not shrink. And that's one of the things that I do right now, my work with immigrant women professionals. So what I do right now is I help them to see that some of what we call personality or what we call respect is actually conditioning. And once you become aware of this, you begin to respond differently. So instead of you automatically holding yourself back, you begin to use your voice in a more respectful way and in a more assertive way. And I'd like to say to people, your voice does not have to be loud to be powerful, but you have to use your voice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unmuted Moments. I'm your host, Ahis, and today we have a very special guest, Doyin Abitoye, also known as Coach D. She's my second ever guest joining me from the country of Canada, our neighbors to the north. She's a HR professional, an author, and a certified life and career coach dedicated to helping immigrants reclaim their confidence and their purpose. She wrote an amazing and very relatable book called Shush. So simple, relatable ways to silence limiting beliefs through stories, affirmations, and reflective journaling. So we're going to be talking a lot today about the book and how we can silence limiting beliefs in our lives, especially if you're an immigrant. Coach D, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into the book, I'd like to start with your journey in Canada. One, I guess, deciding to leave Nigeria and come to Canada, and two, in the transition of getting used to your new country and the new system in Canada.
Thank you so much for that question. So the hardest part before I left was for me starting all over again. That was when I was still in Nigeria trying to decide if I wanted to come to Canada. And just to give a little backstory, the decision to come to Canada wasn't mine, it was my husband's idea. And at first, I was like, no, I'm not relocating. We're fine, we're doing well, we travel for vacations whenever we want to, like, I'm good. So I hesitated at first, but over time, kind of supported him with every other thing. Okay, you have to write your test, I did. You have to go for medical test, I did. But then when the decision came for us to move, I was like, hell no, I am not going anywhere. But then finally, I was convinced and I was like, okay, not a problem. And then it became even tougher, close to when I was supposed to come. Then it was like, oh, Doyin, you have to go first before the other members of the family join you. And at that point, I started fighting again. So at the end of the day, I did come. So back to your first question, what was the toughest or hardest part leaving? For me, then it was starting over. But however, when I got here, starting over was not even the hardest part anymore. The hardest part then became me losing my sense of identity. It was like waking up one day and then realizing that I no longer recognize the woman I used to be. And just to help with a little bit of perspective, when I was leaving Nigeria, I was the head of HR for a government parastatal. And so you can, I'm sure you can guess what that was. So I was in a good place in terms of my career and every other thing, right? So, but then coming into a new country, when the old rejection came, even just applying for like an assistant HR role or a junior HR role, and then you're getting rejections and all that. After a while, I just couldn't recognize the woman that I used to be. The woman who once felt very confident, who was clear, who knew what our vision in the next 10 years was going to be, who was certain about our values. I suddenly felt very unsure of myself. I felt invisible. I felt disconnected from who I used to be. So for me, that was like the hardest part of starting all over again after I moved.
A couple of questions just to give listeners context. So when was this? How long ago was this?
So so first of all, in 2018, we did a soft landing. Then we went back. So a soft landing means like just landing for few months or weeks. Then you get your paper stamped, you get your medical, like your health card and all those things, open your accounts and all those, just soft landing, like you're not settling fully.
You come and do some
and
stuff
go
and then
back.
go back.
So that was part of the process of me saying, no, I can't do this. Like, so I was like, okay, since we had like an expiry date of, oh, you need to land before this time. So we're like, okay, let's just do a soft landing. So we came in 2018, spent about 2 months, went on vacation, and then we went back. We're trying to buy time to be able to make that decision if we really wanted to come. So then to answer your question, I finally landed. In fact, 2 days in by March 31st or 3 days time makes it exactly 7 years that I landed in Canada.
Oh wow! Congrats,
Thank you.
congrats, big 7 years. You mentioned something like in that transition period, like losing yourself. I'm just curious, what did that mean? Is it just more from a family standpoint or from a career, your position at work and having to start all over again, or the family that you had to leave behind until they came back to join you? Like, what was that
Okay.
like for you?
So when I say losing myself, that didn't even have to do with my family. Okay, so just to also help you with some more context. So I landed March 31st, 2019. I when I came, I joined a program. Government is they have this program that they help internationally trained professionals to settle in. So I joined one of the programs done by Access Employment. It was for internationally trained HR professionals. So immediately I landed March 31st. I started the program April 1st. So that kept me busy. And even before the program ended, close to about 7 weeks, I got my first job. But then, back to your question, was it because of family that I said losing myself? Absolutely not. Because then I got my job and then my kids joined me. My husband brought my kids around August, just before school started. And then he went back. But then he joined us fully in December. So it wasn't about the family. Yeah. So, but instead, it was about the shock, going through all those rejections when it comes to the roles that you're applying for. So just imagine me applying for even HR coordinator roles, HR BP roles, something that had done like 10 years ago or thereabout. And still, after applying for those kind of jobs, someone tells you, sorry, once maybe they pick up the phone and they hear your voice, they listen to your accent, and they say, oh, sorry. We already have people, they don't want to say directly that you don't have Canadian experience, but they kind of insinuate it. So losing myself it had to do with the experience of looking for a job, the experience of settling in. So it wasn't family. And then over time, the impact of that was I started doubting myself. I started second guessing myself, which I believe happens to a lot of newcomers and immigrants. I started shrinking. So places where I would have spoken out loud because of the old experience, it really made me lose myself. And I started questioning who I was. In fact, let me make you laugh. It got to a point, even after some years of landing and getting jobs and doing well, someone asked me, okay, so Doyin, what's your career goals for the next 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years? Something that never happened to me before. I didn't have a response. I couldn't recognize myself anymore. So that's why I say a lot of times people do not know what immigrants go through. It's not just even only about you getting a job. It's about even when you are in that job, the kind of things that happen, those silent barriers, those systemic barriers that people don't talk about.
That's exactly why I have this show, and that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on because your book specifically talks about this, right? People who feel stuck in their life, whether it's your career or just by being in a new country. So you're here now. So at what point did this start? You start feeling unstuck, if you will. Did you start feeling like I'm starting to get myself back? I'm starting to get comfortable now. I can more freely express myself. I guess two questions there. One is, at what point did that start happening, and two, what helped you to get to there?
Okay. Thank you so much. I would say it took a while for me to start feeling like I belonged. And how did that happen? I had to look beyond just my environment. I had to start focusing on my mindset. And that was one of the reasons why I had to write Shush, my book. So for a long time, even right now, it's still a journey because I still find myself in some places that you're asking, right, do I really belong? And which takes me back to one of the reels that I have on IG about belonging. So I would say that it's like a continuous thing. Sometimes you get to a place you think, oh yeah, I'm well settled in this job. I already know it. I have my voice. I belong. And then you find yourself in another situation and you start to second guess yourself. And then back to the other question you asked. So what did I do? How did the shift happen? So what happened was that I stopped waiting for validation from outside, from my environment. I started owning my belonging. I started building self-trust. And how did I do that? I had to do a lot of inner work with myself. And that's why in my book I have journaling. So one of the things that I did was journaling. I had to sit with myself. I had to unpack. I was like, doing what is really wrong? What is wrong with you? You used to be confident. You knew who you were. Are you allowing this whole thing really get to you? So I would start with journaling. I started challenging the beliefs. I started affirming my worth. And then just gradually, it was just the work that I started doing internally. So, and I tell people belonging doesn't just start from outside. It has to start from inside. It's an honest journey. And like I said, also, it is still a continuous journey because you find yourself at some other position. You begin to ask yourself, do I really feel like I belong here? So it's a continuous journey as far as we are immigrants.
That
Absolutely.
really resonated with me. And it takes a while, if we're being very honest. I've been in the States since 2007. So I guess next year I'll be hitting 20 years. It's kind of crazy to think about. I came here for college, undergrad. So I did college here and then stayed here since. And in my own stories, I look back, it probably took half of that time, at least 10 plus years, to get to the point where I felt very confident in my voice, or even just confidence to express myself, whether it's a professional setting, classroom setting. I remember after graduating college, you start your professional work, and people would talk about different incidents. They talk about like TV shows. Like in college, I didn't have a TV, so I didn't watch TV in college. So, right, just cultural stuff or sports. Like people like football here and basketball and all this stuff. I didn't grow up watching American football. And all of those things, like you try to want to participate or want to be part of the group. Or I remember I used to, my first job was in New York. I was a captain in New York. I used to I had an African store close to my place. So I'll go and buy stuff. I'll make stew on the weekends. And so like during the work week, I would take my own rice and stew to work. I would like pack my food and bring my rice and stew and my chicken to eat. And then it's just like, I'm like, why am I the only one doing this? And everybody would like go, they'll go together to like a Chipotle or some place, some fast food place and eat. And it took me a while to, I'm not saying you have to like just, if you like rice and stew for lunch, I guess you like rice and stew. But it took me a while to start even like learning about football. Like now I can watch a football game, American football game and enjoy it. But it wasn't from the beginning. Like before, they would talk about this star, or that's game, or that's, and I just felt left out. So those social things that people bond on, whether it's sports, food, like movies, like cartoons or commercial, they talk about, do you remember this commercial from 10 years ago? I have no clue, right? But I think it's also just like a time element too, right? The more you hear, the more you've seen different things, you heard different things that happened. Yes, I remember what happened 5 years ago. So I say all this to mean like for people who are listening now who may have just moved to whether it's America, Canada, wherever in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and you're just having or feeling all this pressure. Like, why do I just not know anything? Essentially, like, why do people talk about all these things that all the time I just feel completely left out? Like, I have no clue what they're talking about. Like, don't be too hard on yourself. It also just takes time. But you just also, I think what you need to do too is like, that doesn't mean don't take yourself out of the environment and conversation. So if you're at work, people are hanging out at lunchtime and people are talking about sports and you have no idea about football and how it works. I think the worst thing to do is to, because you don't understand what we're talking about, to completely take yourself out of the picture. I also find in my own experience, like just, even if you have no idea, but just being around those things, after a while, you kind of know the things that matters. You kind of know the things that people want to talk about. Okay, what do I need to know about this movie or about this show, about this thing that people talk about? But you got to be around it enough for you to understand the things that you can quickly just catch up on and still feel like you can participate in the conversation.
I totally agree with you. And I also wanted to add that aside that, you also need to want it enough. Yeah. Because sometimes you might be talking about those things and you're like, what is this? Like, I'm not interested. I just want to focus on the soccer that I know, the football that I know from Nigeria. I don't want to learn about hockey. I don't want to learn about pitch ball. I don't want to hear about baseball. So you also need to be willing to want to learn. So in other words, I tell people, be willing to unlearn, relearn, and learn. because that also kind of helps you feel like, okay, it seems I'm settling in a little bit. I understand this. You might not want to go watch it, but at least if there's a conversation, you can chip in one or two things.
You know enough to participate. So what do you say? You say unlearn, relearn, and what?
I said
Just
you
so people
have to
don't miss this.
unlearn, you have to relearn, and you have to learn.
So what's the difference between relearn and learn?
Okay, so in other words, one, we know what unlearn is. So there are some things that I have learned that has made me who I am. And so you have to drop a little bit of that. So the difference between relearn and learn is, so you have learned something before, but then you've learned a new way that, okay, this could be better, or I can improve it this way. So you're relearning those things so that it can help you thrive where you are. So in other words, let's say, I'm just going to use a very funny example. So let's say all your life you have learned to make noodles on the cooking stove. And it's like on, put your pot, your water and all that. But then someone tells you, oh, there's a new kind of cooking bowl that all you have to do is put water, cover it up and put it in your microwave. That's another way where you can make your noodles, something like that, right? Something like that. And then, so you already know how to make noodles, but right now you're relearning something new. So sorry, I'm using a very funny
No, no.
example.
So relearning is something you already know. You just learn how to
Better.
maybe do that same thing different. I think, in a lot of for a lot of immigrants, this is true. That growing up, right, there's this culture, it's at least in Nigeria, where children are not supposed to be speaking up to adults or to their elders. So you don't get to sit in that seat until you become an older person or an adult yourself. That's when you can start contributing. But as a child, if your parents say go do this, you go do this, or they say don't do this, don't do that. And so you learn to defer a lot or to not have an opinion or have a voice of your own. And in my experience, I think that's something a lot of us have to unlearn in terms of like you just can't just be in a meeting or in a team or whatever and just have other people and not contribute and have other people be doing the talking and you deferring because sometimes in the workplace especially like you might have some people who are more experienced than you. You might be doing a project or something, and you have people maybe they're older just from an age perspective, or maybe they've just been in that job for 10 years, 20 years. They're just very experienced in that thing. I think from the traditional African mentality, to defer to someone like that, to defer to their experience because they are knowledgeable, they are older. And you have to learn to say, hey, yes, I may not be as old or experienced, but I also have something that could be of value. So how, in terms of unlearning, how do you coach people through this dynamic of coming up from a place where respect's a big thing and we have to sometimes keep quiet, for lack of a better word, like just keep quiet and let your elders speak, and then come to a place where it's expected of you. It's not just like, especially if you're being paid to have a job, it's expected of you to participate and to contribute to your team's project or whatever you're trying to achieve. So how do you coach people through who maybe they've been held back because of this same mentality of deferring to people who might be older to now stepping into a place where they have to now speak up and have use their voice?
I know when you started talking about growing up in a Nigerian household and all that. So I would like to just tell a little bit about where I'm from, right? So I come from a family of educators. My father is a retired registrar from a college of education. My mom also is a retired lecturer. So which meant that I grew up in a Nigerian household where respect, discipline, structure was very important. My dad wasn't against us speaking up. In fact, he would tell me, go ahead and express yourself, right? But then there was this message that I got from my mom around being very careful. You have to be very respectful, and that you do not always have to be the first person to challenge or speak up. So I remember she used to say this word a lot to me. She would say, Doyin, do not be the first to bail the cat. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. She used to say that it became, yes, it's the line is from a fable about some mouse who wanted to know when the cat was coming, and so they were looking for who would have to bail the cat so that they get notified when the cat is coming. So she's like, you have to be careful, you have to be respectful. So what that did to me was that after a while, because I would like to stand up for people, I would like to like speak up and stand up for myself. So what happened was that as I grew up, I became very aware, and which led to sometimes me hesitating. I would have to think twice before speaking. I would have to assess the room, like look around. right? Or I would have to hold myself back because I want to be sure that they're not saying, oh, she's too rude, she's too. And one thing they used to, there was a Yoruba word they used to use for people who were very outspoken then, but I won't use that right now. And so I would have to hold back, not because I did not have something to say, but because I was learning to be careful about how I showed up. And then fast forward to moving to Canada 7 years ago. I moved to a new environment where I was an immigrant navigating a new system. So this pattern became even stronger. So I would be in a room, I would be in a place, I would start to overthink. I would start to self-doubt, right? I would sometimes even shrink in the moment where I actually knew what to say. So that kind of, I'm linking this to the question that you said about us being taught to respect. And then we come in here, right? It starts to impact us. But do you know what? Those times that I said I had to sit with myself, the shift came with awareness. I just now realized, so back to what you're saying about what will I coach people, right? I then had to realize that being respectful, right, it didn't mean that I had to play small. Do you understand? Being respectful did not mean that I had to shrink. That was very hard, but I had to make that decision. So what I started doing was thinking about it as being able to speak out, right, didn't mean I had to be loud or dismissive of my upbringing. But then I had to redefine what respect is to me as an adult. So I had to learn that I could still be respectful and be assertive. I could still honor my values while using my voice. So this is what I would say to people. You have to sit in with yourself, unpack what you have learned then to say, keep quiet, stay silent, and start to say, so how can I not lose my voice? Do you understand? If something needs to be said, be intentional. Pause, but do not shrink. Do you understand? If there's something you need to say it. And that's one of the things that I do right now, my work with immigrant women professionals. So what I do right now is I help them to see that some of what we call personality or what we call respect is actually conditioning. And once you become aware of this, you begin to respond differently. So instead of you automatically holding yourself back, you begin to use your voice in a more respectful way and in a more assertive way. And I like to have to say to people, like, your voice does not have to be loud to be powerful, but you have to use your voice. And finally, I would say respect should not cost you your voice. So that's what I would say to people as a coach.
There's a lot of gems there. And that's also a delicate balance and a good distinction, right? Respect does not mean you have to shrink yourself. And also, it doesn't also mean having a voice also doesn't mean you talk all the
Yes.
time. Like, pausing sometimes to see what other people, it's also part of having a voice, knowing how to use it too. Um, so let's transition into your book now. I think when I was introducing your book, I think for me it was very relatable and very easy. It was an easy read, and I liked you talked about some of your story, and you also used some, I guess, fiction, some people in the story as well. And the things that you focused on, like the reflections, you focused on like the power of silence and being with yourself and thinking through those things. But I think the main thing was reflection, framing, and affirmations. And also journaling, like you mentioned. So let's just sort of unpack those four buckets one after the other. So reflection first, framing, affirmations, and then journaling. And how they're connected, if they're connected in that journey of somebody finding their purpose or finding their voice.
So while I was working on the book, one thing I was very conscious of was the fact that a grade 7 should be able to pick the book and understand. And the same way also, a very intellectual person should be able to read the book and it should add value to them. So back to the question on how these four tools connect. I would start by saying that first thing that I tell people is always start with reflection. Because if you do not know where you are standing, right, you cannot move forward. So reflection helps you to be aware. So like you said, I had some of my stories and some fictional stories, right? But I made sure it touches on real life experiences of people, and most especially immigrants. So the first thing is when you pick up the book and you're reading it, It's telling you stories, you're enjoying the story, but then immediately you're done with those stories. It moves you to reflection. And that is because you cannot change what you do not understand. And if you have read my book in one of the chapters, it tells you and it says that you cannot move forward if you do not know where you are standing. So what that means is that reflection helps you. One, you have to identify your beliefs. What are those beliefs? What are the external ones? What are the internal ones? Then from there, you're able to see patterns. And then while you're reflecting, you're able to also understand your triggers. And then afterwards, everything else builds on that. You can then focus on reframing, and then the affirmation, and then action plans.
Okay. And you talk a lot, you pulled in some like neuroscience concept and such in the book. And one of the ones I remember was how limiting beliefs are like neural highways or pathways, and how it's hard, you have to build new ones essentially. Like you, and to build new pathways or new highways, like you have to use, I guess that's the information part. Like you have to exercise those muscles to create new pathways. So for somebody who maybe just because of like maybe they're in the beginning of their journey in America or in Canada, like you said, like you went through a lot of rejections, and it's just hard for them to see any like to have any positive affirmation. It's hard. Like maybe I can't get a job, so I can't help my family. Maybe I have a family back home who depend on me. I can't help them. I can't even help myself here. So a lot of the things around them are tough and difficult. Like where do you start having that positive affirmation if everything around you is not supportive or not positive? You're not enjoying the situation that you're in.
Okay, so the first step I would tell people when you, and which is something that I have also gone through, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned that part of the belief becoming like a neural highway, because like I said a grade 7 can pick it up, an intellectual person can pick it up, and I try to use a lot of psychological data and backing in my book so that people could understand that when we're talking about limiting beliefs, it's not just only sweet to say, right? So the first step I would say is one, you have to interrupt the thought. And I'm not talking about transformation. It doesn't just happen that way. I'm talking about interruption. So I'm saying that whenever a thought comes to your mind, so for instance, you're saying, oh, I would not get this job, which still happens even to me. Maybe I'm applying for a role, I'm applying for something that means a lot to me. There's a voice that will come up to say that, Doyin, are you sure they will give it to you? Are you sure you really qualify? So what you need to do in those instances, right, is to interrupt those thoughts. So for instance, if you say to yourself, oh, I'll speak up next time in the meeting, and you get into that meeting, the thought comes up like, what about if you say nonsense? So you have to interrupt that thought and ask yourself, is this true that I can't speak up? And then you have to now start taking small actions. So for instance, if it's about speaking up next time in that meeting, the next small actions you have to take is maybe at least in that meeting, ask a question. Or in that meeting, just share an idea. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because we immigrants have a lot to give, because our exposure is a lot more. We've been through a lot. We've seen a lot even from where we're coming from. So we have ideas that people normally won't. Once you tell them, once you get the boldness to say that, they'll be like, wow, how did you think about that? But that came from the experience you've had from your own country or the experiences you've had growing up. So back to what I was saying, you have to take those little steps. After you've interrupted that thought that's coming up in your head, you have to say at least say one sentence or share one idea or even ask a question. So you must have listened to the person talking or listen to the topic or whatever it is they're discussing, so that then you have a question, right? And once you start to do that, that is how you start to rewire your brain. Because what I tell people is that beliefs are built through repeated actions. It's not just about I have an intention, repeated action. And there's a good example that I give. I say, for instance, if you're walking on a grass, the first time you walk on it, the moment you go by, it will rise again. But just imagine you keep walking on that same pathway over and over and over again. After a while, you just say that, oh, I've created a pathway already. So that's the same way it works with our beliefs. We need to continue to do those things to interrupt and to shut those noise.
That's a good. I like the grass visual. That's a very good visual. Because I remember not like here where you have paved roads everywhere. I remember growing up in Nigeria, the neighborhood we lived in had a lot of like roads. It's still a lot of roads like that that have a lot of potholes. Or during like the rainy season, they'd be like the road will flood it. So you have to create a new road. Like people create a new road on the side, and sometimes there might be just like an open land where it's just like grass, and then because the road is so flooded, people will start going through someone's land, but the grass, and then before you know it, it becomes like like a road, right? There was grass before. So this kind of reminds me of that visual of how that's how it happened, and then it just for the next person who comes, it just looks like it's a road. It's always been there. It's not always been there. Someone just started walking on it. People followed, and before you know it, it's a thing. And so you mentioned, so you have to interrupt those old habits before you build new ones. So is it strictly the interrupting of it? Is it strictly just like when that bad thought, let's say the meeting example, like the idea of like, oh, I would speak up next time. When that thought comes up to say, okay, no, I would take this small action, or is it more like going to the positive affirmation to say, oh no, I have a good thought or I have good ideas to share? Like, how is it going all the way to the positive side, or just for now, just trying to interrupt the old habits, and the next step is now building new ones? Like, how does those?
So I would say it's all interconnected. You can't just do one thing and it gives you the result that you need. It's just like you going to the gym. Maybe you have some areas that you want to fix or you want to make it look better, like you want your arms to look all buff
Buff,
up, or you want to have the six
yeah, and
packs or
toned.
toned, or you want your
Yeah,
legs to look toned.
yeah,
So the same way also
yeah.
limiting beliefs, it's in different areas. So what you do is you don't just go to the gym and just do a particular workout and it fixes it. You need to combine quite a number of workouts to address those areas. And aside that, also, you need to continuously do those workouts to be able to see results. It's not just a one-time thing. So now let me take it back to what you've just said. So what it means is that after you've interrupted, after you've tried to take those little actions, I mentioned like I also have affirmations. I'm big on affirmations. In fact, I can call myself an affirmation queen. Yeah, so you also need to use that. Affirmation is also one of those things. Sometimes at the beginning it might sound fake, of which it happened to me too. I felt like this just sounds like like fake. Yeah. But then what you have to do is you have to be consistent. Just the same way you keep working those muscles in the gym, you keep doing those leg work, you keep doing those hard work. So the same thing also, those limiting beliefs that pops his head up, those things that keeps holding you back to be able to use your voice or to silence those things that stop you from silencing those limiting beliefs, you have to, one, interrupt them, take those actions, use affirmation. It might sound fake at first, but you have to keep going. And over time, the shift, it will not be instant. Trust me, it won't. But then over time, the resistance will continue to reduce and it will start sounding better to you. And then before you know what's happening, it becomes believable. It becomes a part of you. Exactly. You believe it. And then over time, it becomes true. Just the same way, after some weeks, you don't see anything. But when you continue working those muscles, you begin to say, oh, it looks like, it's looking like it, right? So the same way also. So it is a process. It is not a sudden switch, right? We build those muscles. So we are also going to be building the muscles of silencing those limiting beliefs. We need to continuously do those things. It takes time, but trust me, if you do it the right way, if you're consistent with it, it starts to make sense.
So you mentioned that you're the queen of affirmations, or how much you believe in affirmation. So just in a practical method, for someone like you, you've been on this journey and you're where you are now, you wrote a book about this topic. Like, how does that look for you today? Like affirmations, like, is it something you do today on a daily basis? What kind of affirmation do you like? Just for someone who's listening to this now, for someone in your position, like, how does affirmation look for you?
So for me, besides having affirmations in my book, if you go into my closet, on the walls in my closet, I have affirmations because that's where you spend some more, like some time, personal time. So sometimes I just look up there and remind myself, doing you have great. Because trust me, everyone sometimes need to hear those things or even say those things to yourself. I know sometimes when I coach people and we get to a point where we have to use some affirmations, and maybe I say to someone, oh, tell yourself great job. it's very hard for them to say to them, so call themselves by name and tell themselves positive things. But the moment they start to do it, it feels good. So back to your question, yes, I use affirmations a lot because there's sometimes also, trust me, even the person who's a coach, sometimes you have down times. What do? I go back to my affirmations. I remind myself who I am, right? I tell myself great things, and that's why I always have them around, right? To be able to refer to those things. And so, yes, I have affirmations that I work with. Some days I don't go to them. Maybe I'm already ready to eat the day, to start the day without, I'm good. But the days when I feel like, okay, it seems you are out of tune, it seems like there's something not sitting well, or it seems like you've had a long day, or doing there some thoughts just cropping up. And aside that, I didn't even stop with myself. So yes, I have affirmations around. I have it in my closet, and I have some on my phone, and I have a lot in my book.
So just from a practical standpoint, for people listening, sounds like one way to do it is to put them, I guess, in the part of the house that you usually look at, that you spend time
Yes.
at. Whether it's like, I guess for me, it could be my office, so it could be if you spend a lot of time in the bedroom or in the kitchen or wherever. So essentially, is it like just printing them and putting them on the wall so you can see them?
Some people, I tell people visual works. What you see becomes a part of you. So make it visual. That's why you see people saying vision boards and all that. So print it out if you can. If you can't, snip it on your phone. Have it on your phone, right? If not, have it on your notepad. Just have it around. Even on my work desk, I have something that says that, something around here that says believe in yourself. So something I found somewhere. So I just have it. So sometimes I just, okay, still look at that, that kind of thing. And one thing I would also like to add is that sometimes it looks like fluff. But I say to people, just start simple. What you have to do, just start simple and ask yourself, how do I feel today? Or ask yourself, what is that one thought that has been bothering me? And then what you have to do is just write it out. So you're not writing it out to impress anyone. You're just writing it out to understand yourself. So that's where we move to the journaling part, right? But then the same thing, affirmation, if there are good words that you like, either from your Bible, from just something you've seen somewhere, just write it out, paste it somewhere, and just once in a while, when you feel like it, go through it. It works. It reminds you of who you are.
So you mentioned journaling. I guess that's one of the tools that you mentioned. You talk a lot about in the book. So from an immigrant's perspective, or from a male immigrant perspective, to be specific, some people might perceive this as like soft. Like, why am I gonna sit with my feelings? Like that's a woman's thing. Like, why would a man have to journal, sit in the corner with a book and a pen and start writing about my feelings? So if there was a male immigrant listening to us right now who might think of journaling as something that's soft, something that maybe is just for women only, like, why I'm a man, I'm strong, why should I be doing this? Like, how would you sort of address that concern, or how would you get them to really understand that this could benefit them as well?
So I was smiling while you were talking because at the end of the day, we are all human. So we have emotions. We get stuck. We want to rant. We want to pour out how we feel. And so back to your question, what would they do? I'll say start simple. Simple. Make it very simple. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be anything out of this word. Just sit in with yourself. So how am I feeling? You could just type it out, or you even just say it, or just write it down. How am I feeling today? Or what is one thought, or what is bothering me? Do you understand? And when you're doing that, you're not writing to impress anyone because you're sitting in with yourself. And you start to unpack those things. And what you're just trying to do is to understand who you are. You're trying to get an awareness of what is happening. So that is journaling, but just take it, be simple. Just be simple, right? It is not about being deep. You don't have to, and then little by little, you start to remove the layers. And the most important thing I'll say is, while you're starting simple, try to be very honest with yourself, because at the end of the day, we all have emotions. Be honest with yourself.
So being honest with yourself, is that meaning being honest with the problems that you have, like the matter whether it's promotion, whether it's you just don't feel like you belong? I guess, what does being honest with yourself mean? Is it just owning up to realizing the problems around you? Like, what does that mean?
Okay. So when I say be honest with yourself, like at some point, everyone around me felt I was good. You got a job in how many weeks that you landed? And not only just a job, you got your HR job. You're not picking and packing. And afterwards, you got your next job, right? With a good company, right? And so everybody just thought everything was just perfect. But when I had to sit in with myself to say, Doyin, why is it that you're second guessing yourself? Why is it that you cannot share your thought or express yourself when they're asking about things? Why is it that you cannot even challenge something, right? Why is it that you are shrinking? So be honest with yourself. One is self-aware and ask yourself, where am I right now? What am I feeling? And because you're not giving that paper to someone, it's about you. So it's about being aware, being real, sitting in with yourself. So for instance, you could ask yourself, how am I feeling? So feeling sad. So that I said, make it simple. So what are the thoughts going through my mind? Thoughts, crazy, or whatever. Do you understand? Or happy, or feeling happy, or tired, or frustrated. And then the next thing is like, so why am I frustrated? No promotion. Or someone spoke to me, or someone was being biased. Or do you understand? Just simple things. And then you now sit back and say, okay, so now the next thing is now, so what can I do to move forward? Just kind of little things. So that's kind of it. Be honest.
In my own sort of personal life, I've thought about journaling. I don't do journaling in the sense of like, have a journal and I can write stuff. But I do journal in terms of like writing. I write a lot on LinkedIn and like write. I do actually that's kind of my journal. I think for me, it makes me pay attention more to what things are happening around me. Like before, like things could be happening. I'm walking the street and I just like walk down the street and I'm not paying attention. But I feel like when you write a lot, whether it's for personal use or for public use or whatever, like I find myself paying more attention to things. Like if I'm in a work meeting, like I pay attention to how people feel, what people are saying, what people are doing. I pay attention to like how the things I say land, they don't land. I pay attention to when I have two little kids. Like I pay attention to some of the stress and frustrations that I go through by being a parent. And I think part of it too is like it's just so many because you can make connections with different things that you can't make connections to if you don't like just sit down and think and process those things. And I do think again, like that idea for me, the idea of like being comfortable to want to like experiment and try new things. I think it's that you gotta sit down and also like first of all, I've sat down and thought about that and it's like, you know what? I want to try it differently. I realized I've done this type of things like this all the time, and these are the type of results that I get. So now maybe I want to be a little more risky. Like even if the things seem like a little more like risky or dangerous, or maybe it wouldn't be positive, I want to take that risk. But you have to have sat down to think about it to then decide that yes, okay, I'm at the place where I can take that risk. So, anyways, so for the men listening to the show, again, there are different ways to do it. It doesn't mean you just have to have a 365 days a week type of journal. It could be something, maybe you, I don't know, maybe you write something which I'm sure you have a guy friends group, WhatsApp or whatever. We all have little communities that we're part of. But it could be something like just sharing your thoughts about things in a group like that, like in your group of friends that you trust. Like I have a group of friends from college that we do a lot together. We talk about different things happening in our lives. That's my own little group. So I imagine for me, that's also part of it. Like even when you share your ideas with small groups like that, it still forces you sometimes to sit down and think about things, think about your life, think about what's going on before you share your ideas. So the idea here is it doesn't have to be one way. There are different ways to sit down, collect your thoughts, and then process it. And then if you want to share it with your friends, just yourself, or even like on LinkedIn or social media. So I do have a couple of things that I wanted to push on from reading the book, not just about your book, but just for books in general, like books that are trying to be self-help, they're trying to help people. The whole idea is limiting how to silence limiting beliefs. But sometimes, what if those ideas are not just beliefs you made up in your head? What if those beliefs are like real beliefs? Like the new immigrant example where you come to this country and because you don't have the Canadian experience or Canadian job experience, you don't, people discriminate against you, for example. Or maybe because you have an accent, people will discriminate against you. So that's not a made up stuff. Like that's real. And so if you're telling someone like that to say, hey, you gotta change your mindset. It's all about a mindset. You gotta take yourself positive things. But the person be like, yes. But no matter how positive I tell myself, like if the system is set up this way to be against me, if people are discriminating against me because I don't have the right Canadian, the right American credentials, or because they don't understand me well, so they don't want to promote me. Like, how do you help someone manage those things, manage the realization that yes, there are systemic challenges you're not just making it's not all in your head. Because the thing that sometimes people don't like is telling people like it's all in your head. Like it's not all in my head. Some of this is a true, tangible challenge I have to go through. How do you help someone, or how do you coach someone through this mindset of realizing the actual challenges they have to go through, and then how that interacts with the mindset shift that they have to do, and putting those together?
This question you just asked is such an important question, and I always say that mindset, when we're talking about mindset shifts, mindset change, and all that, it is not a replacement to systemic changes. And it is not you pretending that those barriers do not exist. Discrimination exists, barriers exist, bias exists, credential gap exists. They are real. And trust me, they matter. So let no one try to shove it aside and tell you it's just in your head. It is not just in your head. They exist. But here is the truth. Limiting beliefs and these real barriers can exist at the same time. But while they may exist, right, at the same time, you need to focus on what you can control. Because you might not be able to control the system, right? You might not be able to control the bias someone sees or has against you when you open your mouth and your accent doesn't sound like theirs. You might not be able to control the bias when someone looks at your credential and all they see is Nigeria, Nigeria, or India, India, or Ghana, Ghana, right? But how can we control how we respond within the system? So in other words, as a coach, a lot of times, one of the questions we ask people when we start to go through the journey of, oh, I have this, I'm trying to sort this out, this is the goal and all that. We ask this question, what is within your control? Or what is within your power? And we ask that a lot during coaching sessions. And that the reason why we are saying or we're asking those questions is because where mindset comes in is to help you separate what you can control, right, from what you cannot. So for instance, we cannot control the biases, we cannot control the credential, though yes, there are a lot of policies, a lot of things that they're creating, right, to curb those things. But the point is that we cannot control that. But our mindset is what is within our control that we can take charge of. And so what I say is that if we're not careful, right, it would always sound like we're blaming someone, right? So what we need to do is we need to focus on, we know that there's a reality, right? But how do I take ownership of my next steps? And that was what I had to do. And that's what a lot of people are doing. And that's what I help a lot of people do. Okay, yes, I understand. They spoke with you. They don't like your accent. Yes. Your name stands out. Yes. You have a credential gap because you've not gone to their colleges or their school. Now, the question is, how can you still take ownership of your next step? So mindset is not about blaming or denying. Like I said before, mindset is about agency. So those things exist, right? I'm not denying that, and I know, and I've also experienced that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this call have experienced that as immigrants. But it is about agency, and when I say agency, I don't mean that you're pretending that those things, that the system is fair or those things don't exist. When I'm talking about agency, I mean you asking yourself, I might not control everything happening to me right now, but I still have a say in how I respond. I still have a say in how I position myself. I still have a say in how I move forward. That is agency. And it is about making sure that the system does not silence your ability to respond, adapt, and move forward.
That's powerful right there. I like that word, agency. So the systems are what they are, but it doesn't mean we just have to like say, yes, it's what it is. I have an accent, or I don't have a Canadian experience, so I can get a job. You have the power to do something about it. How do you go around the system? How do you manage the system, work within the system that you have? Okay, for people who might be listening and thinking, oh, this wishy-washy, oh yeah, I'm going through all this real life problem. You're talking about like I gotta change my mindset and then my life will be fixed. What about this whole thing that it's in front of me? That it's not that we're not acknowledging those things exist because they're real. Any immigrant have gone through them, but we do have a say in them. We do have an agency. We do have. So what can we do? And I think it's that distinction of realizing what you can change, what you cannot change, you cannot change. As we wrap up here, I have a couple of more questions. So another question is this idea of toxic positivity. Some people who hear people who are always doing affirmations saying, I am great. I'm going to have a great day today. And some people, I've heard this on social media. I've heard this term. I don't know if you heard the term toxic positivity. Like that could, some people actually think that could actually be a bad thing. Like, let's say you're not working hard at your job. Say, for example, you have in the accounting world, you have a CPA exam to pass or to take, or CFA exam. You have this thing, something to do at work. But you're always telling yourself, I am great, I am smart, I am this. And you're not doing the work. And then you just keep failing because you have a job to do or something to do, but you keep just telling yourself all this wishy-washy thing. So I guess one question there is, what are your thoughts on positivity can be toxic? Is that one, do you agree with that concept? And then two is, how do you prevent it from happening if you believe that it's a thing?
So, yes, I've heard of what you said about the toxicity, positivity thing.
Toxic
Yes,
positivity. Yes.
I've heard of that. And
Yeah.
really, permit me to use the Bible would say, permit me for those who are Christians to say, faith without work is what?
Dead.
So when we just use affirmations by themselves, right? It's not enough. I started using affirmations. At first, it felt like a joke to me, but then I continued using it. Over time, I felt better. And I said it in my book. I said it didn't give me that opportunity back, but then it made me a better person, right? So a lot of times, affirmation alone is not enough. It has to be paired with something. It has to be paired with work. It has to be paired with evidence. It has to be paired with hard work. It has to be paired with consistency. It has to be paired with discipline. So if your boss gives you or you have a deadline and you do not put in the work and you keep reading affirmations, they'll put you on PIP and you'll be out of that place. Or you have an interview and, for instance, let's say I'm coaching because I help a lot of immigrants. I coach them, I prepare them as in pro bono for interviews. So we say, okay, so if you have an interview and you're reading affirmations and you do not know how to tell a strong story tell me about yourself or to prepare for that interview, of course you would not ace it, right? So I am not a proponent of all affirmations no work. It is put in the work, prepare for those opportunities. So in other words, when opportunities come, preparedness meets it and you get those things. And if you need help from people, ask for those help. And that's why in my book, it's a combination of affirmation, reflection, and action plan. I didn't just stop at only reflection. I didn't just stop at only affirmation. So after you've sat in with yourself, after you know where you are, and after you have thought about what you need to, so how do I reframe this? How do I reflect on this? The next thing is, okay, so what are the affirmations that keeps me going? Then the next thing is, what are the action plans? You need to have actions. Affirmations without action is nothing. It's just beautiful words.
You have to have a specific action plan to put in the work, and they go hand in hand, right? That's the message here. Yes, you do the reflection. Yes, you do the affirmations, but you also have to have an action plan in place to get to the finish line. So I think that's a great place to wrap up here. But I do have a final question. What's the best advice you've ever received?
So I would say that there's something that I mentioned in chapter 1 of my book, which a close friend once said to me when I was in the rough. Those times when I was sitting in with myself, when I was stuck and I couldn't find myself. And it says, you cannot move forward if you do not know where you are standing. You cannot move forward if you don't know where you're standing. So in other words, you have to be self-aware. In other words, it's emphasizing honesty with oneself, because that is the only true starting point for growth. If you're not self-aware, people will be saying, oh, okay. So for instance, let's say you are not self-aware to know that for every time you go into that interview, you are not well prepared, or you're not answering, you're not selling yourself strongly, or when they say, tell me about yourself, or you are not answering the questions well, or you're not preparing a strong question to ask after the interview, or you are not dressing well, or you're not even putting yourself, your best foot forward. If you're not aware of that, there's no way you move forward. And it means every opportunity you have to interview, you keep not passing that. So in other words, you cannot move forward if you do not know where you are standing. So sit with yourself, be honest with yourself, be aware. Where am I standing? What gaps do I need to fill as an immigrant? What gap do I even have to fill now that I've settled in? Doing the next step, you're going, where are you standing right now? What do you want for yourself? And once you are aware, you can move forward.
I really like this visual of where you're standing because the way I've heard this quote before is like in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you're coming from. That's the version that I think I know before. But this version it was when I read your book, I understood this version about where knowing where you're standing because I think it's when it's more helpful because at least for me, it creates a visual like literally like where I'm standing. You got to think about the ground, so you got to think about the where you are. And I think it's from the action standpoint, it just makes more sense. Like okay, like what's the current situation that I'm in now? Maybe some of the old, like the place I traveled to get here might have informed where I'm at now, but ultimately what matters is like where I'm standing right now. So I feel like there's a lot of questions that I have, to be honest, that I'm going to go through, but I think this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming in the podcast. Again, the book is Shush, Simple, Relatable Ways to Silence Limiting Beliefs Through Stories, Affirmations, and Reflective Journaling. There you go. Shush. So how can people find the book? How can people find you, contact you, reach out to you?
Okay, so I have a website. So in case you want to book the coaching, go into my website and it's simply my name and it's www.doyinabitoye. That is DOYIN. My last name ABITOYE. It's one word.com. That's my website. About the book, you can also find the book on my website and you can also find the book on Amazon. And then if you want to also connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, my same name, Doyin Abitoye. I'm also on Instagram. It is Coach D _ my last name. So you can find me in all those places. Once you find me somewhere, even on my website, you find my Instagram and then you can always connect with me anytime.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to link in the show notes some of those, your social media handle as well as your websites. Again, thank you. Appreciate the time this afternoon. And for listeners, if you love the show, please follow and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Thanks for listening. And until next time, stay unmuted.